Hello and welcome to another reading vlog. So it has been a while. It has been a while because I've had a lot of things happen. My youngest was sick. I've taken almost full custody and might be taking full custody of my children. So things have been all up in the air and getting sorted, a lot of discussions, but I'm finally at a point where I can exhale and get back to life pretty much. I have read quite a few books while I was at home playing nurse to my sick kid and dealing with everything, and I'm going to tell you about those books. So the first book I picked up was Five Broken Blades by May Corland, and in this one you've got 5 assassins and they're all paired up and they're all given the same task, which is to kill a god king, but along the way they fall in love with each other. This had all the POVs, so it's a lot of POVs to read through, and I felt like the pacing was killed with that because you have to keep like going back. Okay, now we're going back to this person and then this person and then this person, and it's a very slow progression forward because you have to see the situation through all of the different perspectives. I read this for 116 pages and then decided to let it go. The writing was just very lackluster. It felt very generic in terms of fantasy. I wasn't interested in any of the characters, to be honest, and it wasn't gripping me. 116 pages in was enough for me to get a grasp of the land, and I decided, it's feeling like a 3-star. So this one was not to my particular taste, but I think it is doing the rounds right now because once again, it was released with the beautiful sprayed edges, and I think that is heavily affecting people's decisions whether to read the books or not. Clever marketing ploy, obviously. Of course, you're going to be drawn to something that's got beautiful edges and a cover. But this one, I don't really understand what the hype is about. It was okay, which is why I let it go. The next book I picked up was Saltblood by Francesca de Torres. The cover is gorgeous. I've been seeing it so many bookstores, so when it came into my library, I did grab it, even though I'm not a huge fan of the pirate stories per se, and that is definitely what this is. It is based on the real life of Mary Read, and in this, a woman grows up pretending to be her dead brother, Mark, because he died in infancy, but that child happened to be parented by a very rich family. So to keep the money coming, Mary's mother told her, "You are Mark now." And then Mary uses this male persona to eventually join the Navy at a very, very young age, and then eventually become a pirate because that is a natural progression of things. She falls in love with men, she falls in love with women, she dresses like a man, she dresses like a woman. But to me, Mary felt very dispassionate, very stoic. And overall, the book had a very flat, quiet, deadpan tone to it, even though there were exciting things happening, as you can imagine, in the life of a pirate and during a war. But despite the beautiful writing, and it was beautiful, and the sometimes violent depictions, overall, the book just felt very middling to me, which is why I gave it a 3.25. It was just very even-keeled, and I want a bit of variety and variance in the energy of a book. So I would say though, if you do love pirate stories, if you do like reading about war times, if you do like reading about gender fluidity and bisexual characters, this might be for you. And then I read The Book of X by Sarah Rose Etter. I gave this a 3 stars. This is a book about a girl who is born with a knotted stomach, so this mass of knots, and she's born into a family of meat miners. So in this world, they mine meat as if you would mine gold. They have mines and there's veins, and they carve the thick, juicy meat marbled with white fat from it and sell it. I assume that this book is mostly meant to be a metaphor for what it is like to be a woman. I feel like that's what it was going for, but it just didn't hit for me. I love this author's other book, Ripe. This one, obviously not so much. Once again, the writing was beautiful, but overall the story was just very bleak and depressing, and I didn't connect to the characters. And then the ending just felt like a cop-out. So it was a bit of a miss. It's still a 3 stars because I liked the writing, but there wasn't really much else going for it for me, and it was very slow-paced. And then I was listening to Blood and Steel, The Legends of Thesma by Helen Schroeder, and I did DNF this at around 100 pages or so. This book is about a girl who's been given a death date. She's been told that she will die on her 27th birthday. I think she's 3 years off from that, and she decides she really wants to make a name for herself, fight for her kingdom, go down in glory, So she's training to become a formidable warrior before she expires. This book felt so YA, so incredibly YA, so incredibly generic, like every other YA fantasy out there. The love interest had the personality of a piece of wood, and not even a nice piece of wood, you know, like one that you wouldn't even look twice at. Something you chuck into the fire to burn. It did nothing for me. And like I said, it just felt way too young. So I opted out of this one. This could end up becoming very popular among the masses. Once again, have a look for yourself. But yes, this just wasn't giving me a tune I could dance to. So I did DNF Blood and Steel. And then I read I Hope This Finds You Well by Natalie Sue, which I gave a 4.25 stars to. So in this book, it focuses a lot on office culture. And that seems to be a genre that I enjoy, even though it's been a long time since I worked in an office. But you have a 33-year-old Iranian woman who, let's face it, is feeling pretty unmotivated, pretty depressed, pretty blah about her life. She works in an office and she doesn't really have the social skills. She hasn't networked, let's just say, and she's a bit of the office weirdo. But what happens is they get in an HR guy. There seems to be a bit of a spark between the two of them. And she gets reprimanded because her way of venting her frustrations with her fellow co-workers was by writing how she really feels about them in white text at the bottom of the emails. Unfortunately, on this particular day, she forgot to white it out, and she gets brought in for some reprimanding because she was upset about this particular woman's habit of microwaving fish soup at work, which, fair enough. Like, come on, she's justified, but naturally that's a form of bullying and harassment. So she gets forced to participate in an HR course. And part of that is restricting her email and computer access. However, there's a bit of a snafu, and she now has access to everyone's computer, and she can see everything they type, everything they've done, all of their search history. At the job at this particular time too, there's about to be layoffs. So she decides to use this omniscient knowledge to her advantage. However, shit does not go as planned. She manages to really everything up, and it's a bit of a car wreck type book. You're just watching her go from one disaster to another, and that's entertaining to me. At the same time, you're kind of rooting for her. She's kind of likable, but also kind of unlikable because of just her absolute incompetence in getting her together and using this information effectively. I do feel like she is neurodivergent coded, so I get that. There is a romance there too in the background, which was very sweet, and I was rooting for it, and I enjoyed it. I did enjoy it, and I gave it a 4.25. So if you've always been sort of curious as to see what your co-workers might be saying behind your back or what their predilections are, this is the voyeuristic book for you. And then I picked up The Tatami Galaxy by Tomohiko Morimi and translated by Emily Balestrieri. And I DNF'd this at 30 pages, real quick. So this is a book where supposedly the main character gets to go to 4 parallel universes of his own life. And I believe it is based on an anime series. A lot of the people have said that the anime series is better, so maybe check that out. But for me, the biggest issues were the writing style, which was very frenetic. I feel like maybe it's meant to be written in an anime style, but in book it was too much. It was too much for me, not to my taste. And the main character was an absolute doofus, just making all of the foolish decisions. His best friend was even worse than him, absolute cretin. And I could not read an entire book with him as a lead. Basically, he gets visited by a god who tells him, I have this woman and I'm either going to match her up with you or your Neanderthal friend here. Help me make a decision, bro. What did this woman do to deserve these 2 nincompoops as her possible partner? That's what I want to know. Like, oh, I feel for this woman. That's who I feel for. And why gods would want to match anybody up with either of these 2 drongos is beyond me. And like I said, I couldn't read a book with them as the main character. I was not rooting for them, and the style wasn't for me. So I did DNF this after 30 pages. Sometimes with books, it's just a very instant disconnect, and you're like, yeah, it's just it's not my jam, there's no point persevering. And then the final book I read for this reading vlog was Foster by Claire Keegan. And this is about a young girl who is sent to live with her with some distant relatives over the summer because her mother is having yet another child. And in her new home, she is given the care and attention that she never had previously and literally thrives like a flower who's finally gotten sunshine. In this single summer, she knows what it is to be loved. And then when the time comes to return to her birth parents, my heart broke for her. It is devastating. This author does write beautifully, but I find all of her books have this very quiet tone where not everything is said. It leaves there's a lot of subtlety used, and you're sort of getting the big picture of the story by filling in all of the gaps and fleshing out the periphery. And whilst I did enjoy the story, I gave it a 3.75. I think with Claire Foster's writing, I'm not given enough to really feel fully satisfied. Her books to me feel like entrees, delicious entrees that whet my appetite, but don't satiate my hunger. But yes, this was bloody sad, to say the least. So let me quickly recap the books from worst to best. So we had The Tatami Galaxy by Tomihiko Morimi, and that was a DNF for me. Then we had Blood and Still by Helen Schroeder, and I also DNF'd that one. And then we had Five Broken Blades by May Corland, which was also a DNF. I was wondering if I was going to up my DNFs for this month, and this is when it's happened. The next book was Saltblood by Francesca de Torres, and I gave this a 3.25. And then we have Foster by Claire Keegan, which I gave 3.75. And finally, the best read of this vlog was I Hope This Finds You Well by Natalie Sue, which I gave a 4.25 stars. So those were all the books that I read this reading vlog. Until next time, stay wild, Star Child.